Ted Treasurer Ted O'Brien joins me now from the Sunshine Coast. Ted O'Brien, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah.
Just on Optus, first of all, Ted O'Brien, I understand the opposition wants an independent inquiry. What would an independent inquiry that the regulator ACMA can't achieve?
Well, ultimately, Sarah, we're talking here not just about an emergency services number, but probably the single most important phone number Australians need to have at hand, 000. And we're talking about lives that are being lost. We're talking about delays in getting to hospital. We're talking about heightened anxiety among the Australian community. We have seen these lives lost over just the last few days. The minister fly off overseas. We need to have urgent action here. Now, that includes the need for an independent investigation. You can't have the regulator itself participating in that unless they're just giving evidence and providing advice. They can't run the show, and that is because they themselves have questions to answer. You cannot do an investigation into yourself. That's the simple premise of our argument.
Let's go to the budget position announced today. The government claimed it as a vindication of its economic management. You said the government has spent $100 billion they shouldn't have. Can you detail what that $100 billion is?
So basically, what the government inherited, Sarah, is probably the largest windfall in revenue any government has received in its history. But instead of actually using that revenue to pay down debt, the government put its hand in the cookie jar and started spending and baking in more spending for the future. They've added around about $100 billion to the national debt. This is a debt that will hit $1.2 trillion by the time of the next election. Our message today to the Treasurer is that he announced today a deficit that should have been a surplus, and he is now planning another decade of deficits ahead. There's one thing the government needs to do, and that is to stop the spending spree.
All right, now, Ted O'Brien, you used exactly that expression, stop the spending spree, around the time of the Economic Roundtable. So that's effectively a slogan. Let's go to the details. What specific spending measures are you talking about that you would roll back or cancel that the government shouldn't have spent?
So let me get to the specifics. The announcement today was on last financial year's budget. The government had in there $22 billion of additional decisions it made. Instead of finding offsets, savings in the budget to pay for those priorities, it just decided to spend more money. That means, therefore, that it announced today a $10 billion deficit. $22 billion they didn't find savings for. They could have delivered a $12 billion surplus. And by the way, Sarah, they want to do the exact same thing in this financial year. This financial year, they're planning a $42 billion deficit,
all right,
$37 billion of which is actually government decisions.
All right, now just hold on, Ted O'Brien.
Offsets.
Hold on, Ted O'Brien, if you will. You make the point, and I don't want everyone to get lost in the billions. I just want you to explain what in those 20...
Sorry, I thought you wanted the detail.
No, I want the detail of the spending. So what specific measures would you either cancel or roll back, or that you specifically criticise the government for enacting?
I'll give you an example, Sarah, but before I do, I want to make this point. Every government is entitled to decide what its priorities of spending are. They are then responsible for financing those priorities. The point I made today is that the government has failed to finance for its own priorities. It's not for the government to determine its spending priorities and for the opposition to go and find the savings to offset them. That is entirely the job of the government. But nevertheless, let me give you one example of what I think is a really poor budget measure. And that is a fringe benefits tax carve-out for electric vehicles. Under their plan today, which is costing them 13 times more than what they had budgeted for.
I'm going to ask you to move quickly on this one, because you used exactly the same example at the time of the Economic Roundtable. I was hoping you might have, with that figure of $100 billion, some new details of spending that you would like to see cut back.
So let me just finish that one if I can, Sarah. It means that a nurse who is on $90,000 will pay more money to lease an EV than a lawyer on $200,000. Why? The taxpayer is picking up the bill. This is inequitable, it is unfair, and it is the most expensive way to reduce emissions. This is why it is a prime example I use. Again, it's not our job to identify all of Labor's savings. It's their job if they want to spend the money.
All right, let's go
that is a prime example of bad policy.
Let's go to your leader, Susan Lee, who gave an economic speech recently laying out a philosophy based on restraining big government. So which areas of big government is it that you are targeting? She talked about starting to curtail the universal service, universal government service. So what areas? Childcare, medicines, NDIS? What are you looking at?
What we're looking at first and foremost, Sarah, is to introduce a series of rules to control spending in the budget. Now, ever since the Hawke government, every single treasurer has had to work within parameters, within rules, except Jim Chalmers. So the first thing that Susan rightly laid out was the need for us to introduce fiscal rules in this country. And she's not alone. It's not just Susan, it's not just me. You have the likes of Ken Henry, you have the likes of multiple economists right around the country. They're united around one thing. Jim Chalmers needs to introduce fiscal rules to control his spending spree. It's only the Labor government which believes it doesn't need to control its spending. Everyone else is saying it should. That's the number one point.
Right, but in a sense, it's an easy out for you, isn't it? Each time you're asked, you're prepared to make demands from the sidelines, but you're not willing to offer up any detail, are you?
Well, that's not the case. In fact, we've been very clear that previous coalition governments and, in fairness, previous Labor governments have had such rules, Sarah.
Sorry, I was talking more generally about the shape of the budget, but let's move on for a minute. Now, as a loyal deputy, as you are to Susan Lee, what do you need to do to protect her from challenges to her authority?
Look, I don't think there are challenges. I think where there are challenges, the big challenges are those that face Australia under a very poor government, as Australians become poorer and our economy weaker. It is our obligation, therefore, as an opposition to do two things. One, we need to hold the government to account.
So you're just changing. You're just changing the subject. I'll just bring you back because clearly there have been questions, there have been challenges to Susan Lee's authority. Let me put it to you in this way: when Tony Abbott was preparing to challenge as leader of the Liberal Party, he wrote a book about it. He wrote Battle Lines. Now that Andrew Hastie is doing the same thing with social media posts and strategic interviews, is it acceptable for a member of the shadow cabinet to promote his leadership ambitions so publicly?
I reject that comparison, Sarah. The second point I was going to make, which actually answers the question you just put, is the second goal of an opposition is to formulate policy. And the Liberal Party does it in a very different way from the Labor Party. We believe in freedom of speech. We believe in every single member having a say. We have robust debate. Now, for those people who are accustomed to the Labor Party, that might look different, it might look odd, and I accept that. Because under the Labor Party's rules, you shut up. You do as you're told. That is why you never see Labor MPs out there doing what Liberal MPs do, speaking their mind, robust debate. This is why, Sarah, I believe it's only the Liberal Party that ends up with good government policy.
And yet at the same time,
and we're not afraid of doing so.
And yet at the same time, your colleague Andrew Hastie said of colleagues who'd attacked him over his posts that they were nameless cowards and Muppets for criticising him over those posts. So you're not one of those nameless cowards or Muppets?
Well, no, but can I make this point? Andrew Hastie and every single one of my colleagues are out there right now engaging with the Australian public, and they are debating the issues that matter to Australians, and they do so under Susan's leadership. Remember what Susan said up front, Sarah, when she took the leadership. And that is the need for us to listen, the need for us to debate, and we'll take our time to get policy right. Every member can have their say.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm in no way defensive of that. In fact, I think it is a strength of the Liberal Party. I really do.
So here's a question on the strength of the Liberal Party. In one social media post, Andrew Hastie claimed that both Liberals and Labor let us down by letting the car industry disappear from our shores. Is he right? Was it a mistake not to bail out car makers when you had the chance?
Oh, look, I saw Andrew's post on that. And that was part of a bigger message, I thought. It's a message a lot of us have carried over the years.
It's a very specific question about the car industry I asked you there.
Oh, I know you asked a specific question, but in fact I'm answering it based on the video, which went to a bigger issue, a much bigger issue. And that is the importance of Australia having sovereign capability in key areas. And unless we do address things like our energy costs, something that Susan Lee, Andrew Hastie, me and others have all been talking about, unless that happens, we will see sovereign capability going from our shores.
Why aren't you prepared to answer a question? Why aren't you willing to answer a simple question about the car industry? He made the case for it in his video. He posted that publicly. This is a rich debate. What's your view? My view is this. The future that I want to see for Australia is one where we are rich, we are strong, and we are fiercely independent. That requires cheap energy costs. It does suggest, however, that your robust debate that you want to see doesn't extend to a discussion on the car industry.
On the contrary, Sarah, let me finish my sentence if you can. What this means is we need to ensure that we have the settings right as a government to allow manufacturing to flourish. As a Liberal, I don't believe it's the role of government to dictate exactly what sector should be doing what. That's Labor's game. What we believe in is in ensuring that we get the framework right, the environment right. And what does that mean? It means lower, simpler taxes. It means cheap, clean energy. It means ensuring that businesses have the opportunity to flourish. Things that the Labor Party are not interested in and things that the Liberal Party are united over.
Ted O'Brien, I see out of the corner of my eye that we've just hit 8 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
And you. Thanks, Sarah.